Have you ever had a session where you just walk away from the table feeling defeated? And not because you died, not because you made any bad decisions, but because you just couldn't hit a single thing. Yeah, me too. And this is Monster Mechanics, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of the most overused, underestimated, and accidentally destructive words in the entire Dungeons & Dragons vocabulary. A word that, when repeated, can break morale, wreck character identity, and quickly suck the joy out of your table. And that word is miss. Now hang on, I know exactly what you're thinking. Come on, it's just part of the game. Sure, so is death, so is rolling ones, so is arguing over how grappling works. But we don't do those things lightly. We know those things carry weight. So why don't we give miss the same respect? Stick around, because we're going to walk through the session that shattered my confidence as a player, and one that rebuilt it stronger than ever when I finally figured out what was really going wrong. Oh, and before we charge in like a barbarian in a trap-filled hallway, don't forget to hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, and drop a comment with your worst "all I did was miss" story. You know the one. We've all got one. So recently I was playing a character that I was absolutely adoring in a friend's game. You know the type that I'm talking about. It's the kind of character where you've written a 10-page backstory, you've picked their favorite drink, their handwriting style, and maybe even decided which side they part their hair on. For me, this guy was a rogue with a big heart and an even bigger ego. You know, the kind, arrogant, fast-talking, the kind of guy who winks at danger and throws himself into situations he absolutely shouldn't be in. I spent weeks trying to get him right. He was already becoming a fixture at the table too. The group knew his quirks, they'd riff off his one-liners, and NPCs were starting to recognize him. He had momentum. You know what I mean? That magical moment when a character starts to feel more like a real person than just a sheet full of stats. Then there were the dice. That night was cursed. Absolutely. I rolled a 6, and then a 5, and then a 2, and then a 1, and then another 6. It got to the point where my DM would just glance at my roll and shake his head and say, "Nope, miss." Again, and again, and again. Every time I tried to rally, I would say, okay, I run across the bar, leap off the table, and try to stab the Goblin King in the shoulder. The dice clattered, 5. The DM sighed, miss. And I tried to play it off, like, maybe I'm a little clumsy today. Maybe I've had one too many drinks. The next round, I shoot my crossbow across the chandelier and the dice clatter. A 3. Miss. At some point, I stopped talking. I just stared at my dice tray, wondering if I should cast Fireball on myself and go out in a blaze of glory. The rogue wasn't cocky anymore. He wasn't clever. He wasn't unpredictable or bold or even annoying in a charming way. He was just a guy. And I walked away from that game feeling really bad. Not even mad, just not even frustrated, just disconnected. Like my own character had been uninvited from his own story. But here's the twist. It wasn't the dice that did it. So it actually hit me a few days later after the session, and I was sitting at my work desk, and I had that feeling, the game is behind you, the dice back in their pouch, and you're just sort of mentally chewing on everything that happened. I was going over the scenes and the jokes and some of the choices that our party made, and, sometimes when you're doing this, you're riding the high, and sometimes you're replaying things that just didn't sit right. And that day, I couldn't stop thinking about how off that session felt. And not just for me, but the whole vibe was really weird. The pacing dragged, the players were looking at their phones more, and that wasn't the usual table energy that we had. The kind that fills the room when everyone's locked in, everyone's hanging on to the edge of their seats. And then I remembered I had recorded the session. Now, not to be weird, but I do this sometimes. Nothing professional, just a mic on the table to help with recaps, voices, and rulings, little stuff like that. I hadn't planned to listen back, but I was curious. I wanted to understand what actually happened, not just how I felt about it. So I put on some headphones and opened up the file and started listening. And the beginning was fine. We had some banter, some good setups, and a few laughs. But then we hit the first combat. and suddenly I was reliving it, all of it. You swing and miss. You fire a crossbow and miss. You leap off the table, twist in midair, land behind the goblin, and then you miss. It just kept happening. And not just the bad rolls. I mean, those understandably happen by random. It's what happened after the rolls, or more accurately, what didn't happen. There was no drama, no flavor, no payoff. It was just a flat mechanical note that said nothing happens next. That was the moment that it hit me hard. I wasn't upset because I had a bad night with the dice. I've had plenty of those over my 25 years of playing this game. And I understand that that's part of Dungeons & Dragons. What broke me was that every time I tried to do something cool, the response I got, the narration, the world's reply, was silence. Just miss. It's like a door slamming shut again and again. My character, this guy I had built with layers of personality, flaws, and swagger, became nothing that night. Just a guy that couldn't hit. A walking math problem. A ghost in his own story. And suddenly I realized I had done that to my players before. Unintentionally, when I was a dungeon master. Without even meaning to, I leaned in on miss as a placeholder. I had said it without thinking. Nope, miss. Next. Just trying to keep the session moving along. But what I was actually doing was denying them the story they were trying to create. I had built up this whole character, right? Weeks of writing, imagining, and shaping this guy, and a single bad session, not because of bad luck, but because of empty narration, nearly erased all of that for me. And that was the moment that I realized it wasn't the failed dice. It was me, forgetting that every roll, even bad ones, is part of the story. So the next session, I was behind the screen. Our dungeon master had swapped to a player character, and I had the reins again. I felt comfortable, and I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the week before to my rogue, about all the times I had dismissed a miss with a shrug, about the way that my rogue and my experience had vanished into that black hole of nope. I didn't want to do that again, not to anyone. So I had grabbed a sticky note and slapped it on the inside of my DM screen. I didn't really overthink it. I just wrote down 4 words. The players never miss. Now, obviously, I didn't mean that literally. I wasn't changing the rules. I wasn't going to fake rolls or fudge ACs. What I meant was the dice might miss, but the story never should. That night, we're back at it. The players were level 2, fighting a small group of cultists holed up in this herb-filled, half-collapsed farmhouse kitchen. Smoke still curling from the hearth. Pots clattering. Everything smelling like a damp wood and burnt sage. First round, whiff. The barbarian swings his great axe and rolls a 5. So I go. You lunge forward, axe raised, and the cultist whips his scimitar up just in time. The blades clash, and your axe carves straight through the table next to him, the splinters flying everywhere. He stumbles back, wide-eyed. And the player looked at me, grinning. Next turn, the ranger fired an arrow, which was another miss, but I didn't say that. I said something like, you notch a arrow and fire. It sails between dangled herbs, through the smoke, a perfect arc, until the cultist ducks away from the barbarian's blow, and the arrow zips past his ear, burying itself in the wall. He spins, shocked, staring at you. And I just kept doing that. Every miss became a cool cinematic moment, something real. Sometimes it was a tactical dodge, sometimes it was sheer luck, and sometimes it was the chaos of the environment. But every single time it was something. I didn't say miss once the entire fight. And the craziest thing, nobody else noticed. Not directly. Nobody said, hey, Mech, you're narrating differently. What they noticed was that suddenly they were in it, and they were hooked. That fight lasted 12 rounds, no exaggeration. Nobody hit anything for most of it, but there were no phones out, nobody got bored, nobody sighed or slumped or zoned out while waiting for their turn. They were living it. The kitchen turned into an awesome war zone of swinging blades and dancing shadows. Every attack was a part of a larger story. Even the misses added pressure, added meaning. The cultists felt dangerous, competent, not because they were winning at any point in the fight, but because they were surviving. And then the moment that absolutely floored me, our barbarian, the guy who's always saying he hated role-playing, who had treated D&D like a tactical math puzzle, after finally dropping that last cultist, turned to the surviving one and started talking. He actually started role-playing. He lowered his axe. "You don't have to die for this. Walk away. Give us what you know and maybe you get to live." And our entire table was silent. And then in character he added, "You held your own. That means something." And later he told me that fight, it didn't feel like numbers. It felt like a scene. It felt like he was there. And that night, our barbarian became his character. And all I had to do as a dungeon master was stop saying miss. So here's the thing. I know some people hear this and immediately clutch their dice bag like it's their firstborn. But if the roll misses, it misses. That's the rules. Yeah, you're right. That's the mechanical truth. But what I'm talking about here is the emotional truth of the moment. See, Dungeons & Dragons isn't a board game. It's not poker. You don't win at D&D. There's no jackpot. There's no perfect play. What we're doing when we sit around a table is collaborative storytelling. And that means even failures, even the non-events, are opportunities to tell a better, more immersive story. That's the real point of all of this. The roll doesn't determine whether something cool happens. It determines how much control the player has over what happens next. Because when you say miss and move on, you're cutting off the branch of the story that player was trying to climb. You're pulling focus away. You're saying that moment you imagined, the action you built up in your head, it didn't happen. You get nothing. And as a player, that's just deflating. But if you take that same roll, that same mechanical miss, and frame it as a narrow dodge, or a clever parry, or a flash of luck on the enemy's part, suddenly the player still matters. Their choice still echoes in the scene. They see themselves inside the action, not watching it from the sidelines. It's not cheating. It's not softening the blow. The hit points didn't change, the combat still plays by the same rules. You're just refusing to let a bad roll become a boring moment. And it works in reverse too. When enemies miss, don't just say, their attack fails. I like to narrate the party's defense. The wizard deflects with a gust of wind from their cloak, or the fighter pivots and raises their shield in a perfect block, or something like the rogue slips under the blade like they knew it was coming. You're reinforcing character identity through this every turn. The dice are just the physics. You, as the DM, are the cinematographer. You get to decide whether a miss is a static camera cut or a slow motion dodge with sparks flying and swords clanging. I know some dungeon masters are worried about muddying the game up with too much narration, or making things too dramatic, or that it might slow things down for their table. But trust me, it doesn't, because players start feeding into it. They'll mirror you. They narrate their own attacks more. They describe their stances, their footwork. They start thinking in character instead of just announcing damage output. When you treat misses like meaningful moments, your players stop asking, "Did I hit?" and start asking, "What happens?" And that is when the game transcends the rules. So how do you do it? How do you stop saying miss without falling into the trap of over-explaining every roll or turning combat into a one-man stage play? It's actually a lot easier than it sounds, and it starts with a simple mindset shift of thinking that every action deserves a reaction. I've trained myself as a dungeon master to treat every player move, whether they rolled a 4 or a 24, like a beat in a scene. Not every one of these moments has to be Oscar worthy, but every moment should say something about the characters, the situation. Let's say your fighter swings and rolls a 9 and doesn't hit. Cool, fantastic. Instead of saying that misses, you say you swing hard, but the hobgoblin raises his shield up just in time. Steel scratches against steel, and you feel the shock travel up your arm. What have you done? You reinforced the fighter's strength, the hobgoblin's training, and the tension of the fight. You didn't lie, you didn't bend the rules, but you gave the moment teeth. Or let's say the rogue misses a sneak attack. You lunge from the shadows, your dagger aimed straight for his ribs, but he's faster than you thought. He spins, your blade scraping across his armor. His eyes widen. He didn't know you were there, but he does now. Boom. Suddenly, the failure matters. It has consequence. It sets up the next turn. Now there's urgency. That's not a whiff, that's a dramatic escalation. And you don't have to script this stuff. You don't need to rehearse. You just need to start asking yourself, what just happened in the story? Not the rules, not the math, not the armor class, the story. And hey, don't burn yourself out. You don't have to narrate every single miss with Shakespearean flair. Sometimes the moment is simple. You swing. Too slow, he sidesteps. Or you fire, but the arrow's angle is off and it clatters uselessly into the cobblestones. That's still short, snappy, and way better than you miss, next. I'll even prep a few phrases ahead of time, like mental paintbrushes. Blade rebounds off the shield. Enemy slips under the strike. Arrow grazes the target but doesn't stick. It's like giving your narration a toolkit instead of always reaching for the same wrench. And here's the best part. The more you do this, the more your players will do it too. They'll start narrating their own misses. I swing wildly, throwing him off balance. Or even if I don't hit, I'm trying to drive him towards the ledge. Through this, you create a collaborative storytelling momentum. The table becomes less about success or failure and more about the drama between the roles. And once you unlock that, combat will stop being a rules exercise and will start being a scene from a movie that you all want to watch again. But there is a part of this that I didn't expect. Once I started doing this, narrating misses like they mattered, it didn't just make the fights more fun, it didn't just make the players feel more heroic, it didn't just fix the bad rolls blues. It reclaimed the game for us. It brought back the soul of why we played Dungeons & Dragons in the first place. See, when we're kids, we swing sticks and say something like, "You didn't hit me." And the reply is always, "Nuh-uh, I dodged." It's never, "Your attack missed because the dice said so." It's the story. It's imagination. It's living in the moment where your character leaps, rolls, lunges, and fights with everything they've got, whether they win or not. Somewhere along the way, we let go of that. Somewhere between the CR math and the encounter balancing, between the rules debates and the spreadsheet builds, we started treating misses like dead air. Like a pause button, like, well, you did nothing. Next. But when you give that moment back, when you narrate through the misses, when you let the dodge, the parry, and the wild swing become part of the scene, you're reclaiming that spark. You're saying this game isn't about numbers. It's about who your character is, even in their worst moments. And that's when the players start to lean in. That's when the bard, who normally just casts vicious mockery, starts describing the way her voice rings through the church bells through the battlefield. That's when the warlock, who never talks in character, starts taunting the enemy mid-miss because he's still in the scene. That's when the barbarian, who only cared about damage output, actually starts to roleplay. Not because you changed the rules, but because you changed the frame. Because you made it clear, even when the dice say no, the story says you still matter. And let me tell you, when that starts to happen, the table stops feeling like a game and starts to feel like a true story and even a legend. So the next time your players roll low, don't say miss. Because in Dungeons & Dragons, there's no such thing as missing. Thank you for watching Monster Mechanics. If this video helped you think differently about your game, please hit that like button and share it with your D&D group, and subscribe for more tips, deep dives, and breakdowns on how to make every encounter of yours legendary. And tell me in the comments, what's the best miss you've ever narrated or witnessed at the D&D table? Until next time, may all your failures be epic, your crits be cinematic, and your worst rolls tell the best stories. Until next time.